There exists a moment when chaos subsides and what remains is shame. Not because you've made a mistake, but because you've done nothing at all. Stay here with me because at the conclusion of all this, you'll understand why Carl Jung argued that your undisciplined self is not laziness. It's exiled and begging to return home. We never confront what it means for a person to watch themselves violate the same promise every day. Saying tomorrow, knowing that tomorrow will never come. Walking through the mirror and feeling resentment toward your own reflection. Not from self-hatred, but because you've stopped believing yourself. You claim you'll change. You declare you'll start. You even believe it for a few hours. Then the next dawn arrives and the one who made the oath has vanished, replaced by the same exhausted expression. Still scrolling, still fleeing, still hiding. Carl Jung once stated, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." But what if avoiding discipline is precisely this? Not just procrastination, but a spiritual rejection of your future self. This is where we begin. Because what if I revealed to you that the tired, unfocused, easily distracted version of you doesn't represent who you are? What if it's only who you've learned to perform? If this is already awakening something within you, don't just observe. Subscribe because this channel exists for the parts of you that no one else talks about. You've been conditioned to believe that discipline is about effort, but that's incorrect. Discipline is not effort. It's identity. And you'll never become disciplined as long as you keep identifying as someone who needs to become it. This may sound strange, but stay with me because once you understand this, the battle you fight every morning will begin to make sense. You see, Jung believed that many people never become who they really are. Not because they don't try, but because they remain strangers to their own potential. They chase change as if it were something external. A new job, a new environment, a new system, a new motivational video. But the truth is you don't need more. You need less. Less escape, less noise, less hiding from the one thing you've always feared most. Responsibility. Not responsibility to others, not to your boss, not to your parents, but responsibility to your becoming. The sacred contract between who you are and who you were meant to be. This is where discipline resides. Not in checklists, not in 5 a.m. alarms, but in devotion. Reflect on this. When have you felt most alive? It wasn't during pleasure. It wasn't while resting. It was when you were in alignment. When you honored your word. When you amazed yourself by accomplishing what you thought impossible. That feeling wasn't just pride. It was integrity. And Jung would tell you that's no coincidence. The psyche desires unity. It wants to integrate. The more fragmented you are, saying one thing, doing another, the more your subconscious will rebel. You'll feel resistance not because you're lazy, but because your mind rejects the falseness of who you're pretending to be. This is what many don't grasp. Lack of discipline isn't the disease. It's the symptom of a split soul. You've been divided. One half of you sets goals. The other shatters them. One side wants to build. The other wants to fade. And every day you repeat this cycle. You're not just wasting time. You're deepening the division. Carl Jung warned of this. He believed that what you resist persists, that the parts of you that you abandon don't die. They wait. They become your shadow, not just the dark or damaged parts, but the disciplined, ambitious, ruthless, structured, powerful part of you that you've locked away for fear of failure or your own strength. Yes, your strength. That's what you're really afraid of, isn't it? Because if you commit to this, if you truly become disciplined, you'll have no one left to blame. You can no longer hide behind potential. You'll have to become proof. And that terrifies. Because once you become proof, you can no longer escape your destiny. You're either growing or dying. And the world will watch. But here's the truth. You're already dying. Every time you betray your schedule, every time you abandon your priorities, every time you hit snooze, scroll past your promise and settle for cheap dopamine instead of earned respect. You don't feel tired from work. You feel tired from guilt. Because deep down you know this isn't who you're meant to be. And I want you to hear this next part clearly. Not with your ears, with your bones. Discipline isn't something you add to your existence. Discipline is the soul's immune system. It protects you from spiritual decay, from regret, from becoming a man who possesses everything except himself. Leave a comment when something hits deep. You might help someone else who's still trapped in the part you've already healed. And now I need you to remember this. There was a time when you wanted this. Before the distractions, before the burnout, before you lost faith in yourself. But your spirit hasn't forgotten. It has waited patiently, silently for you to return to that sacred fire, to the forge where discipline was once born in you. We'll go there. We'll rekindle it. But not yet. Not until we discover the root. Because now we'll descend into the origin of your undisciplined self. Where the fracture began, why you resist structure, and how Jung's theory of archetypes reveals the buried identity that sabotages your every effort. This isn't motivation. This is transformation. And once seen, you'll never return to who you were. You didn't become undisciplined by accident. You were trained not by a moment but by thousands of small betrayals, some from the world and some from yourself. And at some point you began to internalize a story, that you're someone who almost always makes it, someone who almost changes, someone with potential that never manifests. But that story isn't you. It's a survival mask, created by fear, rejection, abandonment, and the subtle wounds that no one else noticed. And now, years later, that same mask has become your identity. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So let's make it conscious. Let's go back not to relive but to understand." Do you remember the first time discipline was punished in you? Maybe you tried to speak and were silenced. Maybe you got excited about something and were ridiculed. Maybe you followed a routine, built something small, took pride in it, only to see someone destroy it as if it were nothing. This is how the fracture begins. Not from laziness, but from pain. And here's the brutal irony. The disciplined part of you, the one that wants structure, control, focus, is also the most vulnerable because discipline requires belief. It requires faith in your power. And when that belief is broken early, the disciplined self goes into hiding. This is what Jung called the repression of the noble archetype, the king, the warrior, the architect of order and control. The part of your psyche that wants to build empires, lead itself, master time and energy. It's still there, but it's been distorted by years of internalized defeat. Instead of standing upright, it now lurks in the shadow. Not dead, just unclaimed. So every time you try to start something, a new habit, a morning routine, a clean diet, a focused work sprint, you're not starting from zero. You're confronting every ghost that has ever told you that you won't follow through. You never finish what you start. You're not the type of person who can change. And unless you realize this, you'll continue to sabotage yourself, not because you want to fail, but because part of you still believes you have to. Here's the insight Jung left us. Your external failures rarely concern effort. They concern identity. You can't outwork a self-image that contradicts the very thing you're trying to become. You'll always return to the man you believe you are, no matter how many systems or tools you try. So how do we change that belief? Not with affirmations, not with enthusiasm, but with integration. Let's go deeper. Imagine two men inside you. One wants power, legacy, structure. He's focused, calm, sovereign. He keeps his word even when no one's watching. The other wants ease, comfort, disappearance. He avoids risk, avoids failure, avoids intensity. He craves warmth, not victory. These two men aren't enemies. They're split versions of you. And as long as you reject one, you'll never be whole. You must stop trying to kill the lazy version of yourself. You must reclaim it. Talk to him. Ask him, "What are you protecting me from?" Because I promise you that lazy part of you isn't trying to ruin your life. It's trying to protect you from pain, from the sting of disappointment, from the memory of being ridiculed, abandoned, misunderstood. And when you begin to see this, discipline becomes something sacred. It's no longer a war. It's a return to the throne you abandoned. A return to the center of your psyche where the king archetype sits watching, waiting, not to dominate but to stabilize. Jung knew that every man must eventually meet his inner king. And when he does, he stops performing. He stops seeking permission. He begins to organize his life, not to impress others, but to reflect the inner hierarchy he has finally restored. This is what discipline really is. It's psychological architecture. It's the external reflection of internal order. And when a man lacks it, he doesn't just lose productivity, he loses his identity. This is why undisciplined men feel shame even when no one's watching. Because it's not about what they've done or haven't done. It's about who they fear they're becoming. The fragmented self is a haunted place. And unless you reintegrate the lost archetypes, the builder, the warrior, the father, the guide, you'll continue seeking motivation that never comes. Because here's the truth. You were never meant to depend on motivation. You were meant to remember, to awaken, to walk through your day like a man who has already decided this is who I am. This is what I do. This is the order I bring. And yes, it will be painful. Yes, you'll fail. But failure won't define you anymore. Because identity precedes behavior. And once your identity changes, your behavior will follow. If you're still here, you already feel it happening. A part of you is awakening. Not the hyperactive and overperforming part, but the ancient, wise, structured, calm, relentless part, the one that doesn't shout. It builds in silence. And now I need you to hear something else. You can't fully reclaim discipline until you forgive yourself for the years you've lost. It's not about punishment. It's not about regret. It's about maturity. The immature man says, I'm broken. I need to be fixed. The mature man says, I'm whole. I need to be remembered. So remember this. There was never anything wrong with you. You just forgot who you were. And every time you choose structure over chaos, presence over distraction, action over hesitation, you're not becoming someone new. You're returning. Returning to the man your younger self needed, the man your older self will thank you for being. You see, Jung believed that the greatest work of your life isn't success. It's individuation, becoming whole, becoming real, uniting the fragmented parts of yourself into a living, breathing truth. And discipline, it's the path to that truth. It's how you prove to your unconscious that you're safe, that you're in control, that the king has returned to the throne. So I leave you with this question. What would your life look like if you stopped living as a reaction and started living as a declaration? Because now we'll complete the journey. We'll talk about time, about death, about the war that continues when you avoid order, and about the quiet, unshakable strength that begins when you stop needing to feel ready and start acting as if you were born to lead. It's not about becoming productive. It's about becoming sovereign. And the final transformation awaits you. Time doesn't simply pass, it accumulates. Every minute you delay your discipline becomes part of the architecture of your life. Not just as lost opportunity, but as a brick in the structure of regret. You don't just lose time, you become shaped by the loss. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." That phrase should haunt you, not because it's harsh, but because it reveals the most brutal mirror. You don't need to be convinced of who you are. You're already proving it every day. And many people don't even notice the moment they drift. They simply wake up one day, 10 years later, and realize that the man they've become isn't the man they admire. It's a version carved by delay, by hesitation, by stories that seemed like wisdom but were really fear in disguise. You weren't born lazy. You were trained to distrust your power. And you've spent years softening the edge of your ambition, polishing it so it wouldn't threaten anyone, not even yourself. Because true discipline, it changes the room. It's not loud, but it carries weight. And that weight unsettles people who haven't risen yet. This is why you started hiding. This is why you let go. You wanted to stay close to people who were still sleeping, because awakening meant walking alone. But what if that solitude was a test? What if your loneliness wasn't punishment, but passage? You must understand something that many men will never realize until it's too late. Every time you betray your potential to stay comfortable, you're practicing death. Not physical death, but spiritual erosion. The slow extinguishing of fire. The fading of will. The quiet resignation of a man who once had hunger in his eyes, but now has only excuses. Carl Jung didn't believe we find meaning by chasing happiness. He believed we find it through confrontation. Looking the dragon in the eyes, the chaos, the failure, the pain, and walking toward it with open arms. Discipline is your sword in that confrontation. It doesn't eliminate fear. It gives you something stronger than fear. It gives you direction. You see, every man is disciplined. The only question is toward what? Some are disciplined to their distractions, others to their addictions, some to the voices of doubt they inherited and never questioned, but very few are disciplined to their becoming. And if you want to be one of them, you must accept that discipline isn't a phase. It's not a chore. It's a way of relating to time. Let me explain. Every time you choose what feels good now instead of what builds you later, you're telling time, I don't respect you. And time, like every sacred force, responds accordingly. It starts moving against you. You feel late. You feel stuck. You feel like everything is slipping away because you never honored what you were given. But once you realign, once you begin living with reverence for time, your days change, not externally at first, but internally. You begin to feel carried by rhythm, by purpose, by the calm that comes when your life is no longer a reaction, but a ritual. And that's what discipline becomes at the highest level. Not willpower, not force, but ritual. A sacred rhythm between you and the future you've sworn to build. You wake up not because you have to, but because you can meet your oath again. You train not to punish yourself, but to remember yourself. You eat clean not for vanity, but because your body is the temple of your determination. Everything becomes aligned. Everything begins to echo your truth. And one day the man you once dreamed of becoming is no longer a vision. It's your reflection. But let me be clear. This won't happen in a week. This won't come from a breakthrough. Discipline isn't built through enthusiasm. It's built through mourning. Yes, mourning. Because to become the man you're destined to be, you must let the other one die, the one who breaks his own word, the one who hides behind someday, the one who feels empty every night because he knows he ran away again. You must bury him, not with guilt, with honor, because he was doing his best. He kept you safe. He brought you here. But now his time is over. And when you finally grieve that version of yourself, when you stop fighting him and thank him for his role, you free the energy you were using to pretend. And with that energy you build. You build mornings that begin with clarity, not chaos. You build routines that ground you even when you don't feel like it. You build a schedule that doesn't trap you, but frees you. Because order isn't your enemy. It's your armor. And the more chaotic the world becomes, the more precious a calm and structured man becomes. You become that man. And it starts now. Not next Monday. Not after another failure. Now. Because this moment, this breath, this heartbeat, this uncomfortable truth inside you is your initiation. You don't need another reason. You don't need to feel ready. You're already worthy of being disciplined. You just haven't remembered it. So let this be the final reminder. Carl Jung believed that wholeness isn't achieved by adding more, but by embracing everything you are. Even the parts you've tried to avoid. Even the parts that felt lazy, weak, chaotic. You're not here to escape them. You're here to lead them. And when you do, when your inner house is in order, you won't just feel powerful. You'll feel at peace. Because true discipline isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg to be seen. It walks quietly, daily, like a man who has finally remembered what he came here to do. So return to your vow. Not tomorrow, now. Because once you do, you'll never avoid discipline again. Not because you have to, but because you'll finally know what it feels like to be a man who keeps the word he gives to himself.